At least 2 soldiers were killed and 8 injured in a terror attack this morning as a terrorist gunman with an automatic weapon attacked an IDF outpost in the Jordan Valley. ILTV's Devo Klein reports.
The gunman approached on foot, undetected, and surprised 2 soldiers preparing to open the Taysir checkpoint for Palestinian traffic. They exchanged fire with the gunman at close range for several minutes. The terrorists then managed to enter the base and reach the watchtower. A backup team arrived at the scene and opened fire on the gunman from outside the army post, forcing him to run. After a chase, a soldier tossed a grenade at the terrorist, killing him instantly. 8 soldiers were wounded, including 2 who were evacuated in critical condition. Later, the IDF announced that the 2 soldiers had succumbed to their wounds. They were identified as 39-year-old Sergeant Major in the reserves Ofer Young from Tel Aviv and reservist Tzvika Friedman from Ein HaNatziv. Tzvika leaves behind a wife and 6 children. The terror attack came amid the ongoing Operation Iron Wall, an anti-terror op conducted by the IDF aimed at confronting terrorist threats in northern Samaria. The tragic results today ended with 2 reservists killed by a terrorist and 2 families shattered, forever changed, on this Tuesday afternoon. May they both be of blessed memory.
President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu will sit down today for a much-anticipated meeting with a potential major Middle East realignment in the offing. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Prime Minister Netanyahu has been holding meetings at Blair House for visiting leaders in Washington ahead of his potentially fateful White House meeting with the U.S. president. The visit marks Netanyahu's 14th stay at Blair House, more than any foreign leader since it was built in the 19th century. Netanyahu told Israeli reporters accompanying his visit that he would discuss Israel's war against Hamas, the release of all the hostages, and the Iranian terror axis. Also high on the agenda, Netanyahu would discuss normalization with Saudi Arabia, the broadening of the circle of peace, and achieve an era of peace through strength. An urgent topic of discussion between Trump and Netanyahu will be to extend the current 42-day first phase of the hostage deal and Gaza ceasefire. Israel wants to continue the return of hostages without committing to Hamas's demand for a full stop to the war, a demand opposed by Israel. Netanyahu met again with Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, to discuss the negotiations on Phase 2 of the deal. The thorny questions of the governing of Gaza post-war will be raised. During the ceasefire, Hamas has been consolidating its forces and is openly controlling the streets. Netanyahu will impress upon Trump the need to resume fighting in Gaza. President Trump stated what he said should have been obvious on day 1 of the war. Egypt and Jordan should take Gazan refugees. That, too, is expected to be discussed. Ahead of his meeting with Netanyahu, President Trump, when asked about potential Israeli expansion in Judea and Samaria, said this.
It's a small country in terms of land. See this pen, this wonderful pen? My desk is the Middle East. And this pen, the top of the pen, that's Israel. That's not good, right? You know, that's a pretty big difference. I use that as an analogy. It's pretty accurate, actually. It's a pretty small piece of land. And it's amazing that they've been able to do what they've been able to do when you think about it. There's a lot of good, smart brain power, but it is a very small piece of land, no question about it.
Other issues on the crowded agenda, the fragile ceasefire in Lebanon due to expire on February 16th and guarantees needed to end the threat from Hezbollah. And of course, the all-important issue of Iran, how to confront Iran directly to end the so-called axis of resistance led from Tehran and preventing the Ayatollah from obtaining nuclear weapons.
And joining me now to discuss all of this is Ron Campius, former D.C. Bureau Chief at the JTA. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Ron, with today's highly anticipated meeting between Netanyahu and Trump, there are reports that Trump plans to watch the full October 7th documentary detailing the horrors and the atrocities of that day before their conversation. Perhaps he's already seen it by now. This will certainly set the tone for the meeting, won't it?
I think so. I think that Trump has been connected to the hostages since almost immediately after the October 7th events. He asked to be in touch with one of the hostage families, the one that spoke at at the Republican convention. So he's he's already very aware of the horrors of the day. And the documentary, the screening of the documentary might help even further shape his outlook.
Now, what do you expect to come out of today's meeting in Washington? What key topics do you think will dominate the discussions?
I think, first of all, the release of the hostages. I think that's key for Netanyahu. He needs to show that he needs to show the Israeli public that he's pursuing that. There was a survey today that showed that most Israelis feel that, or a substantial majority of Israelis feel that Trump was instrumental in getting the current ceasefire to go into place and getting the hostages released that have been released so far, and the whole 33 that are promised to be released. And in thinking that Trump will have to pressure Netanyahu to keep this process going. So the question is, what happens in the next phase? Netanyahu is facing pressure from within his government, as Steve pointed out, to not give in to a full end of the war. But I think he'll be facing pressure from Trump to create the conditions that will allow the release of all the hostages, not just the 33 that we're supposed to see released in this stage.
So we know that there will be other topics of discussion as well, aside from the hostages. Israeli media suggests, though, that Netanyahu will focus on normalization with Saudi Arabia and addressing the Iranian issue, rather than pushing for the second stage of the deal to release the remaining hostages. Do you foresee this to be the case, and what do you make of his set of priorities in this meeting?
I think everything's interrelated. It's interlocked. You can't create discrete silos of release the hostages, smash Hamas after the second phase is over, and make a Saudi deal. I think and Trump might tell him this, that a Saudi deal, it would be very difficult without an end to this particular conflict and a path to a Palestinian state. That's distinguished from Palestinian state. What the Saudis are reportedly looking for is a path to a Palestinian state. And whether Netanyahu feels that he can, walk that line between his government and popular Israeli opinion that's opposed to anything resembling a Palestinian state at this particular point, and the Saudi demand that there has to be a path to a Palestinian state, we'll see. That's the thing. And it's the whole dynamic of Bibi's visit is interesting, because on the one hand, he's the first foreign leader to meet with the newly re-elected president, Donald Trump. And as he points out, that's a big honor. That's a big first. On the other hand, what I found interesting is that Netanyahu really, in meetings with Biden and meetings with others, he's always gotten his way as to the timing of the meeting, which is usually coincident with the 8 p.m. newscast here in Israel. In other words, having the meeting at like 1 p.m. so you can get the pictures on the news. Trump isn't having that. He's having the meeting at 4 p.m. and it's a typical Trumpian show of strength. Like, I get to determine when the meeting happens, not you. So that might be an indication as to how the dynamics of the meeting play out.
Now, with Trump now back in power and eager to act, how likely, in your opinion, is it that normalization with Saudi Arabia can actually be achieved in the near future? We've been here before, but what steps do you think are necessary for this to actually become a reality now?
I think that that if it's going to become a reality, there has to be some sort of consideration of an outcome for the Palestinians that would be conceivably acceptable to the Palestinians. I don't think that I know that there are people who are saying that you can count out the Palestinians for now, especially because of the brutality of the October 7th attacks and Hamas revealing itself for what it is. But in the Arab world, for the Saudis, you can say that the Saudis believe in this cynically, or you can say that they actually believe in this. There really is an investment in some kind of stable outcome for the Palestinians, and an expression of Palestinian nationhood. And that's the way it's been for more than a century in the Arab world. So I don't see that being wiped off the slate right now. And I don't know how Netanyahu navigates that requirement. I think that's going to come with the demands of his government, that there be absolutely no consideration of Palestinian statehood. Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned this. What is the significance that Trump's first meeting with a foreign leader is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
I think it's a sign of how much Trump is invested in the Middle East. He really, he showed it in his last administration. He brokered the Abraham Accords. He wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He wants to get a deal coming out of this.
Thank you very much for your input today.
Thank you.
One key issue likely to come up in the meeting between Trump and Netanyahu is the situation on Israel's northern border. ILTV's executive editor, Mayan Hoffman, has the full report.
Despite relative calm on the northern border, the IDF announced Monday that it has been conducting operations to secure the area and dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure in accordance with Israeli-Lebanese agreements. As part of these efforts, troops from the 769 Brigade recently uncovered multiple weapon storage facilities containing mortar shells, missiles, rockets, explosives, firearms, and other military equipment. The stockpiles were seized and the facilities were dismantled. Additionally, soldiers eliminated several Hezbollah terrorists, detained threats, and cleared the area of potential dangers. These operations are part of broader preparations for the return of northern Israeli residents next month. The IDF also reported installing approximately 1,300 protective shelters and distributing 3,700 safes to emergency squads. That is in addition to 20 fortified guard posts. Security measures include new fences and perimeter roads, which have also been put in place.
More families are waiting for their loved ones to come home from captivity in Gaza, as we expect another hostage release to happen this coming weekend. But what is the fate of the second stage of this deal and the remaining male hostages still in captivity? ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is in Hostage Square with the details. Shosh?
Well, Sivan, what our viewers need to keep in mind right now is while this ceasefire deal remains ongoing right now, it's still in a fragile state as officials still need to negotiate the second phase of this deal, which could free men under the age of 50 years old and all male soldiers. Although 13 hostages have been freed in phase 1 of this deal, 20 more hostages, including 8 bodies, according to Israel, still need to be released within these 42 days. But what happens in phase 2 is still yet to be determined. Prime Minister Netanyahu is meeting with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and other American officials in D.C. to discuss the next phase, all while Israel is sending a high-level delegation to Doha to discuss next steps in this ceasefire hostage deal. The second phase would bring home the remaining living hostages in exchange for an undetermined number of Palestinian prisoners and a full Israeli withdrawal from the Strip. Supporters of the hostage families tell ILTV their thoughts on the deal.
Well, it's so difficult to predict anything these days. I mean, it seems like it's moving along, but there's obviously so much political machinations going on that it's difficult to know. I hope so.
I would like them to bring them back. It's no question. So I can't blame the family, they pressure the government or whatever they do. It's your children. If it was me, I will go there by myself. You know what I mean? I want them back, but I don't know in what cost. Then they kidnap another one and another one. It's never going to stop.
The family of Yarden Biba shared their first public statement since his release, saying Yarden keeps asking about his wife Shiri and 2 young sons, Ariel and Kefir, still in captivity. They say, quote, "We have no answers." Reports say Yarden suffered mental, physical, and psychological abuse in captivity, where he was held in a cage for long periods of time, lost significant weight, and was taunted about his children and wife. The relatives of the 5 Thai nationals released from captivity on Saturday have arrived in Israel to reunite with their loved ones. The Thai hostages began sharing their stories from captivity, saying they saw no sunlight for more than 15 months and dreamed of food. They were locked in a room with a guard for 24 hours a day. 4 days after her release, Agam Berger attends her sister's IDF ceremony. In an emotional video, Berger places an aiguillette on her sister's shoulder on her uniform. Berger was the last female soldier to be released from captivity and is known for keeping her Jewish faith of keeping Shabbat and praying in captivity despite harsh conditions. As for the next hostages to be released, a senior Hamas official told Russian media that Russian-Israeli citizen Alexander Sasha Trufanov will be released imminently in this current phase. He was taken from his home on Kibbutz Niros.
Thank you very much, Shosh. Following U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to relocate Gaza's Palestinian population to other countries, a majority of Israeli Jews support the idea. Meanwhile, Arab nations strongly oppose any forced displacement, calling for Palestinian rights and self-determination to be safeguarded in the reconstruction process. According to a recent survey by the Jewish People Policy Institute, approximately 80% of Jewish Israelis support Trump's idea to relocate Palestinians from Gaza to other countries, with a significant portion viewing it as both practical and desirable. The idea, which was once considered illegitimate by many Israelis, now sees support among Jewish Israelis. However, 13% of Israelis believe Trump's proposal is immoral. This group includes 54% of Arab respondents and only 3% of Jewish Israelis. The proposal has sparked heated debate across the political spectrum, while right-wing Israelis largely embrace the plan, considering it a solution to the ongoing conflict. Centrist and left-wing groups dismiss it as unrealistic and divisive. Meanwhile, Arab nations have united in their opposition to any forced relocation of Palestinians. A joint letter from the 5 Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Egypt, and Jordan, was sent to U.S. officials condemning such measures. These nations insist that any future for Gaza must involve the Palestinians' right to self-determination and inclusion in the rebuilding process. While Israel's political divide is evident, the international community is also deeply divided on how to approach Gaza's future. And today's meeting between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump will likely touch upon this and other potential solutions. $6.5 billion is needed to provide heavy bulldozers to clear Gaza rubble and hundreds of thousands of tents and caravans to house the Gazan homeless after 15 months of war. That's the estimate of what's needed to cover the immediate crisis of homelessness in Gaza. But the chaos on the ground caused by Hamas gunmen makes an organized international cleanup operation unlikely anytime soon. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has more.
On the ground in Gaza, the distribution of aid is not going smoothly. Gazans threw rocks and attempted to hijack the trucks. Hundreds of trucks are entering daily, but once the trucks enter, many are grabbed by Hamas and others fall to mobs attacking the convoys. With the fighting paused amid the fragile ceasefire, Palestinians are appealing for billions of dollars in emergency aid. They're asking for heavy machinery to clear rubble. They are also in need of hundreds of thousands of tents and thousands of caravans to house the hundreds of thousands made homeless by damages to their homes during 15 months of war. More than 500,000 Gazans returned to homes in the north with nothing more than they could carry. When they reached home, many found a wasteland of rubble where neighborhoods once stood. The Palestinian Authority estimated that $6.5 billion was needed to provide short-term housing in Gaza. U.S. Special Middle East Envoy Steve Witkoff estimated last week that rebuilding Gaza could take 10 to 15 years, but before that, Gazans will have to live somewhere. Meanwhile, President Trump issued an executive order to end U.S. funding of UNRWA, the leading aid group in Gaza. The U.S. previously halted aid to UNRWA in 2018 during the first Trump administration. The funding was resumed under Biden. UNRWA has come under increased scrutiny since the October 7th massacre after it was proven that a number of its employees participated in the attack and kidnapping and holding of hostages. Hamas gunmen are using the ceasefire to reassert their de facto government in Gaza. Hamas officials clearly want to extend the ceasefire and say they are ready for negotiations of Phase 2 of the truce. Hamas informed the mediators in Cairo and Doha that they are waiting for the initiation of the next round of negotiations.
Iran is reportedly accelerating its nuclear weapons program, with new intelligence suggesting the country may be on track to develop a crude nuclear weapon within months. This comes amid rising tensions with Israel and continued military pressure on Iran's infrastructure and U.S. President Trump taking office. A new intelligence report published by the New York Times reveals that Iran may be fast-tracking its nuclear weapons program. The U.S. has uncovered evidence that Iranian scientists are pursuing a quicker, less advanced route to building a nuclear weapon. This could potentially enable Iran to develop a crude device within months rather than taking years, though the weapon would not yet be sophisticated enough for missile deployment. Despite these developments, U.S. officials caution that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has not made a definitive decision to pursue a full nuclear arsenal. The intelligence also comes amid setbacks for Iran's regional influence, with key allies like Hezbollah and Hamas facing significant challenges. Furthermore, Israeli airstrikes have targeted Iran's missile defense systems and nuclear-related infrastructure in their previous attack, further complicating Tehran's military capabilities. Meanwhile, U.S. and Israeli officials continue to monitor Iran's activities closely, particularly as both countries assess whether a nuclear deterrent might be Iran's strategic response to potential military threats from the West. As President Trump prepares to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu today, Iran's nuclear program is expected to be a central topic of discussion, with both leaders weighing the options and military responses. And today we have the privilege of hearing once again from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. She shares with us a recap of some of the most important headlines from recent weeks. Let's take a look.
Shalom, my friends, from here in the Holy Land. I'm Yael Eckstein, and here are 3 things that you should know about Israel this week. Number 1, all of Israel is celebrating the miraculous return of 4 girls who were taken hostage on October 7th and held by Hamas terrorists for over 470 days. We continue to pray and wait for the remaining hostages who are still being held by Hamas. May they all come home very soon. Number 2, in some Israel news, Israel's population has reached over 10 million people. There are just over 7 million Jews in Israel, and the rest of the population are Muslim, Christian, Bedouin, Druze, and there is freedom of religion for everyone. It is the only place in the Middle East where Jews, Christians, and Muslims can worship freely. And number 3, in some positive news, this past Monday we marked International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and we also marked the 80th anniversary of Auschwitz being freed. Today there are still around 250,000 Holocaust survivors across the world, and the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is on the ground, bringing them everything they need to live their final years in dignity. We are there to tell them that Christians around the world love them and will care for them for the rest of their lives. Well, there you have it, my friends. There are 3 things that you now know about Israel. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more updates on what's happening in the Holy Land. Shalom.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected across the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of around 10 degrees Celsius or 51 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, heavy rain showers are expected alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of about 16 degrees Celsius or 61 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, ILTV.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching.